Thank you very much. We are nearly there, so I'll try to make this as exciting as possible. Exactly, woohoo! So the Grow Foundation, we are a Swiss-based social impact organization dedicated to help economic, well, third nation countries, developing economies, to enter the global market. So we are specialized in carbon market development, but we are not a carbon development company. We use carbon sequestration as a tool and motor for economic growth. My background is now for 20 years. I've been working with governments. We structured infrastructure projects. I've worked with national hedge funds. Right now, I'm also an associate partner with the General Capital Group. We do sovereign wealth management. Again, it's all government work. The GDP of Mauritania, for example, is $14.5 billion. Last year, on the hedge fund side, we managed $16 billion in transactions from a small office in Munich. But the foundation is the good side. This is where I personally started this, to see that the contacts that we have in managing large scale of capital can be brought into developing countries. So I tried to keep it very, very simple. They're visually not very, very exciting. But I have these conversations with governments around the world very, very often. We're very, very active across sub-Saharan Africa. We're very active in the Pacific nations and Southeast Asia. And it's always the same question. In the equivalent of this project, that's a question that needs to be answered here. Why does the SAREP project need to happen in Mauritania? So I very, very rarely talk about the carbon projects themselves. There's a lot of technical experts who do this. There's a lot of brilliant engineers here. There's a lot of market-leading experts here who know how to implement a project. I smile and I talk, and I try to explain and answer the why for that country. And this is something, the kind of conversation we'd have, and the professor needs to have with the government of Mauritania. They just need to know one single number. Managing sovereign wealth, the number that they need to learn is 1.5%. Whenever you're talking to national stakeholders in developing economies, especially in Africa, you can say, guys, the only argument for this project to happen is that number, 1.5%. What is it? 1.5% is the number of international global investments that flow into Africa. So of all global investments, of all the capital that this project needs, which is in competition to international investment, 1.5% goes into Africa. Not Mauritania, all of Africa is fighting for this. So when you talk about and think about this number, everybody has good ideas, everybody knows what to do, they have very, very clear plans, they are very, very sometimes ambitious and strong development numbers, but at the end of the day, everybody says, we know what to do, we know who to do it with, we've sourced all the experts, all we need now is, I don't know, $10 billion. Yeah? And that's now in competition against other projects. The entire GDP of Africa right now was surpassed by NVIDIA, a company that nobody knew about 5 years ago. This year, NVIDIA doubled the GDP value of all of Africa combined. That's what we're in competition with. That's what we need, the type of projects, the type of people in this room, the nations that are trying to attract investment, they are competing in a global market, and that needs to be recognized. And that's what we try to implement. I will get back to that 1.5% figure because that's, like I said, everything everybody in this room needs to remember when you are having conversations with any one of the other nations. Because while they know that the development and the technology and the projects are important, they are still in a global competition for capital. So how does the Grow Foundation solve this? When we talk at a very high level about projects. When we talk about carbon projects, we say, listen, this is a tool. The truth is, nobody understands carbon projects, excluding Nature Ray in this room. Yeah, they know how to develop it, yes, and Felix over there, that's true. Yeah. But at the end of the day, the nation states and the counterparties we're talking with, they are interested in economic development, they're interested in poverty reduction, they're interested in capacity building for the community. So the Grow Foundation is certified under the UN SDG framework, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the UN FCCC framework, the Framework for Climate Change Convention, and we're also an advisor in COP. So when we talk about carbon projects, again, we talk about it for a tool. At a low end, at a grassroots level, this project is about job creation, it's about food security, it's about water security, and it is about capacity building. So the counterparts we're talking with, if a carbon project is successful, it's about attracting foreign direct investment while mitigating risk for capital to flow into the country. And the result is not that we have a few trees and can produce more fish. The result is that we've created jobs and livelihoods and an economic future and hopefully enough surplus to invest into industries. Our personal thesis, my personal thesis, as an half African, I'm Ugandan Irish, my thesis is that in order to eradicate poverty, which is UN SDG goal number 1, you need to meet UN SDG goal 8. If we manage to move it. Now you have to imagine a very, very similar picture, but in a slightly different color. It says UN SDG goal 8. Which it doesn't want to move forward. Can someone click to the next picture, please? So UN SDG Goal 8 is about economic development. Economic development goes under 4 pillars. It's about industrialization, value addition, and market institution. And that's what we invest in. In total, we are the signatory on deployment capital on a fund for infrastructure development for about $1 billion. So far, not a single cent has flown into Africa. So most of it flows into Southeast Asia, into economic development. So again, the goal is, in order to eradicate poverty, in order to fund those livelihoods, the water security, the food security, the capacity building, we need to first teach these countries how to monetize carbon markets. That is what this room is doing. We need to strengthen institutions with the engineering capability and the capacity building. That is the competency that is in this room in order to develop the projects. And they need to understand that the surplus revenue of these projects is the motor for economic growth. And that is when you get the attention of the political counterparts that we need to convince in order to move forward. So, very, very briefly, if we go to the next picture, please. I'm trying to fly through this because I appreciate we have to find coffee somewhere. Just one example of one of the projects we did, and this is a pilot out of Indonesia. But I'm going to use Ugandan numbers for this. So we used reforestation to generate carbon certificates in exactly the same model as NatureRe did. NatureRe, the example that you just saw, is one of the leading methodologies to implement carbon projects. This is how it should be done. We then use this capital to repay back capital, repay stakeholders, and then we invest into livelihood projects. One example, for example, is now My Bali Coffee. In a pilot project, we started working with 4,000 coffee farmers in Indonesia, in Bali specifically. But we didn't just give them charity, we didn't just give them a grant. We owned and invested and developed the entire supply chain to now deliver My Bali coffee in about 1,000 stores in Germany. And we've now, with big supply chains, we now have a contract to supply and scale into about 11,000 stores. We then have a very, very simple model that the participating farmers in Bali, they all basically, like a Commonwealth ticket, they all supply into a centralized buying company, and now they benefit from the sale of coffee in a supermarket in Germany. We've calculated that when we do this in scale, we're now going to expand this pilot into East Africa, Uganda, Kenya, and Ethiopia. And we've done the math that we can increase the income of a coffee-holding family by 5 to 10x. Simply by sharing the revenues of selling coffee in a German supermarket, the average family that has previously sold coffee beans now participates in the revenue of having sold coffee in a supermarket. The Ugandan numbers are numbers that I know off by heart, being half Ugandan. The average Ugandan coffee farmer on a hectare of land, his income will be about $360 in that year. He can produce on that hectare of land, he'll produce about 550 kilos worth of roasted coffee. That's the amount of sellable coffee that we'll have produced. And yes, of course, there's transport, logistics, fees, compliance. There's all kinds of costs involved. But this farmer will earn $360 no matter what. The minimum sales price in the supermarket for those 550 kilos of roasted coffee that he got $360 for is 11,000 euros. If we produce it and roast it and sell it in a coffee bag, in a coffee bean bag, it's $80,000. This farmer still had $360. So simply by thinking as a social enterprise and then working with the farmers, and that's what the stakeholders here need to understand, Nescafé is not interested in industrializing the communities here. So projects like this need to be the engine of economic growth to invest in local ownership, industrialization, value addition, and global market access. And the funding for that comes from projects like this. If that's the language we learn to speak, they will listen. Because again, what does 1.5% translate to in Mauritania specifically? They do have a multi-trillion cubic meter oil and gas field that has been developed. They didn't sell the economic development rights, but they were not able to develop them fully. So as usual, as most developing nations, the lion's share of the economic development goes to foreign developers. The target of Mauritania is to own a share in each one of those projects. The average share that you could find is 7%. If a project like this could be reinvested into that supply chain simply by increasing the percentage of ownership of an oil and gas field from 7% to, God forbid, 15%, we're talking of hundreds of millions of dollars of economic value. Iron ore is an export. It's the lowest part of the economic supply chain. This is an example of value addition. The economic income, the surplus of the SAREP project, could be used for value addition for Mauritania to not just sell iron ore, but sell other higher level metal products. Mineral wealth. The mineral wealth of Mauritania hasn't even been explored. Imagine if as a side project of the SAREP project, a few $1 million could be invested simply into exploring the mineral wealth. We heard it here earlier on, everybody is randomly digging for gold. We, hypothetically, as partners with the government, should be digging for that gold. The economic benefit of these projects could be owned by this country. There's a leading fish industry. The cooling chain across the entire chain is missing. That, again, is an investment product. It's an investment challenge. But again, Mauritania is competing against projects like NVIDIA, against projects like Google, against simple other industrial projects. So why risk the investment into a place like that if the S&P 500 will give me 11% return of investment? That is the truth. Carbon certificates solve that because suddenly we can create a Lloyd's of London insured financial product that European companies need to buy. And the carbon market will be a $1 trillion market, according to Bloomberg and McKinsey and all the others, 10 years from now. So if we set up ourselves now, the SAREP project will be a beneficiary in that, and it is the key, again, for economic growth. Last but not least, the youth potential. And there's a massive opportunity to repeat the India model in Mauritania. Because I'm sure lots of people, the non-Mauritanians in this room, don't know this. The average age in this country is 23. The median age of this country is 17 and a half years old. 40% of the people in this country are under the age of 16. We have 10 years' time to have prepared an economic benefit model to build the capacity of that youth to become one of the main economic drivers of this country. And it's not that hard. We need to clean the water, we need to plant the trees, we need to invest into everything we've heard here. And then it'll be a success. Thank you very much.